Welcome to Feel Seen Space. We are a digital platform designed for artists and creatives who yearn for more. At a time of massive change, what does it mean to create? What role does artistic expression serve for the individual and the collective? On this podcast, we try to answer these questions by interviewing artists on their holistic creative processes, their work, and their personal journey. Today, I am very excited to welcome Tasha Young. Tasha is a writer and creative director, and for the past 2 years, she's been working on a project whose mission is really aligned with ours here at Feel Seen. She wants to help creatives reconnect with their flow and their joy through an app that's designed to enhance the creative process. Because creative work is not regular work. We aren't meant for a traditional 9-to-5 or for constant output. And we've always known this, but now science actually backs it up. This wonderful new app is called Oevra. And in there, Tasha and her team have gathered cutting-edge tools inspired by the latest research in neuroscience and psychology to really get you moving on your creative projects. In this conversation, Tasha dives into her own journey and how every step the research that eventually led her to launch Oevra. She is as passionate about the creative process as we are. And through this new tool, she hopes that more and more people will reconnect to this intrinsic part of themselves. Enjoy!
Hi, Tasha. Welcome to the Feel Seen Space podcast.
Hi, Roxanne. Thanks for having me.
We're so happy to have you. Where are you in the world right now?
I'm in Berlin, in Germany.
Amazing. So you're working on launching your new project, Oevra, and it's a really exciting new endeavor for you. Can you talk a little bit about this beautiful project?
Yes. Oevra began as a research and writing project, like most everything I do. It was a way to explore ideas that I had about the creative process and my lifestyle as a full-time professional creative for all my adult life, that it just couldn't fully be expressed through text alone. So at first I tried to make it like an online course or something, but then I just knew that I had this real love for design and for, art direction, creative direction, and like really immersive digital experiential design. I really like just browsing sites like awards with 3 Ws and other sources for really great web design where you can have a really artistic experience on a web page. I find that really an interesting way to combine artistic expression with design and technology in a way that can also be taken into in-person spaces with art installations and things like that I've attended. So I was really interested in how could we take this concept of like an online platform for the creative process and getting into the flow state and connecting with other creatives and make it into this experience that feels like it's really coming off of the screen and really feeling immersive wherever you are. As someone who's moved around and traveled and works on the go a lot, and also someone who's very sensitive to my environment, I always have these practices and things that I do, even if I'm at a cafe or in an airport or train, whatever. I'm always like listening to ambient music or something with noise canceling headphones and like trying to make the conditions just right in my little bubble where I'm writing or creating whatever. So that was really something I was interested in exploring further. And I knew that I had to figure out how to make an app and a digital platform for the first time in order to realize that. So it took me almost 2 years to get to this point where we're launching. So it's been a pretty big endeavor. But yeah, we're finally there, and I'm really excited to share it with people.
We are really excited for you because it's so needed. You have a lot of skills. You're a multidisciplinary artist, you're a writer, creative director, brand strategist, and of course now you're the brain behind this amazing platform. Is there a time in your career that you felt the need to express your creativity even more?
Well, I was raised by 2 creative people, so it's always actually been very encouraged. I think in a way I'm very fortunate for that, even though it wasn't a perfect childhood situation. You know, we were quite, well, I grew up in Maine, first in Portland, Maine, and then we moved to the woods, a short drive outside of Portland. So I had kind of like an isolated upbringing and in a very provincial environment, let's say, with my parents were both kind of freelance or very, doing working class jobs just to get by and doing their own creative thing. My dad's a full-time musician still to this day and sound engineer and stagehand, and he was also teaching guitar lessons for a long time. He used to go on tour as a sound engineer with bands, that kind of thing. So music was definitely my first real creative passion and still is. And my mom is very much like multidisciplinary as well. She loved to paint and draw and make jewelry and also loved to sing, and there was always music around. So it was very much a free-spirited artistic household that I grew up in. And I think I was also like, I think I was like 9 or 10 years old when I was starting to use the internet for the first time. Once I discovered the internet, I started to design little web pages since I was very young. And I was using online communities to connect with other kids, since I was super young because I felt quite isolated in my small town. And I was always like seeking connection with other like-minded people from a really young age. So yeah, I think this is something that goes very deep with me.
And would you say this need for community also push you to start oevra?
For sure, because as a writer, I was a professional writer for over 12 years. While I was still a university student, I started writing professionally, and it was definitely at times just too lonely and isolating. There were years where I was, even before lockdown and everything, I was working remotely or from home for quite a few years. So I'm definitely someone who's like comfortable with that, but also started to really crave more connection and working with other creative people and getting that kind of cross-pollination that can really light me up. I feel like earlier in my creative career, it was actually a lot more social. In my writing career was really started in journalism, like interviewing musicians and artists and writing reviews, going to concerts and reviewing the concert, that kind of thing. And very much started in the Montreal music scene. And then I moved to New York City for a journalism job and was doing the same thing there for a year before the economy and the journalism world just started to kind of collapse in on itself. And then I just really went into copywriting to make a living from there when journalism was no longer like a viable path. And I was writing journalism like for art magazines and stuff outside of work, wrote a novel, that kind of thing. Like that, I was always doing lots of different creative outlets with writing that would help me connect with other people and other creatives. But then I was in that 9 to 5 marketing and brand world for such a long time that I really did feel a need to do something more meaningful.
Yeah, I feel you. And it's interesting because in your novel, you talk about taking a leap of faith and the imposter syndrome that you can have in your career. Have you experienced that as well?
Definitely. A lot of what I wrote in my first book was coming from a deeply personal place. And I think I've gotten better at it the more that I think that's quite normal. Is like as you get older and more experienced, the imposter syndrome naturally kind of eases up and falls away the more that you just do things and put yourself out there and connect with other people and realize that it's a shared human experience that everyone who's like ambitious and trying to do something that's really meaningful to them, who really respects the craft of, the people they look up to, especially. I feel like we always aspire to be our greatest self. And at the same time, we compare ourselves as a work in progress to everyone else's masterpiece. So it's just not, you at some point you kind of have to let go of that, and just whenever that comes up, I just take that step back and, in a humble way, just be like, it really doesn't matter where I'm at now. I don't know how me today compares to the reality of whoever I'm comparing myself to in my head. Does that make sense?
Yes, no, absolutely. And I think what you're building with the app And the platform, it's also a great tool to help with creative blocks. And sometimes being too in your head, perfectionist, having this imposter syndrome can really block your creativity. I would like to hear a little bit more about how the platform works. I know it's very based on your personal journey, but what do you feel can really help creatives today?
Yeah. Well, in the Oevra app, we actually have a feature that's called Get Unblocked, and it's really a series of kind of, I call them escape plans, or they're like little mini guides or protocols for any kind of block that you have. So imposter syndrome might be one of them, perfectionism, procrastination, all these different things that block us either internally or externally. And just doing research in psychology and mindfulness and neuroscience about all of these different topics, I kind of curated and crafted recommendations and solutions and exercises that you can do for any one of them. And I think it really is interesting. I think there's so much advice out there. There are so many tips out there. Like if you're scrolling on Instagram or reading articles, there's tons of good advice out there, but it was never like easy to access or consolidated all in one place before. And that was part of my intention with Oevra, is how do we get all of this great wisdom that exists into one place where you can very seamlessly access it and have that just be, just a click away from getting into the flow state or actually starting your creative process. So you're not jumping around all these different tabs and spending tons of time browsing and searching or chatting with AI to answer your questions or to get the help you need when you're trying to work through something or work on something. I think the thing that creatives really need today is a space that can preserve your mind from the constant distraction that is just very intentionally bombarding us all the time. When we are in this digital interface that we spend so much time in, it can so easily just hijack your attention. No matter how many blocking apps you download, I'm doing that all the time. I'm trying to block Instagram and trying to put time limits on my Instagram use. Like I struggle with this every day myself. So I think Oevra was really, for me, a way to design an online experience that's like a container for your creativity, where you can just turn on Do Not Disturb mode and just have this on your screen and then be doing whatever you want to be doing. And this is like your toolkit, and it kind of helps you tune out the world with the custom ambient music I commissioned from some wonderful artists that I love, to try to help also with focus if you like music for focus. Yeah, it's very much designed to answer those needs, I think.
So you travel quite a lot. You lived in many different big cities like Montreal, New York, London, Paris, LA. I'm wondering, how do you regulate your nervous system in the face of uncertainty, being always on the move?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And that was a side quest in and of itself, was just regulating my nervous system between constantly just being on the go or having these big narrative arcs where I decide, now I have to move to the other side of the country. Now I have to move to this other continent. I just have these ideas and then I'm very driven to make them reality. And then sometimes I catch up with my bad self and I'm like, oh God, I'm really burnt out. That was a lot. So yeah, I've done many years of therapy, and honestly, that was what taught me so much and really inspired me to share a lot of what I was learning in therapy. In the US, I had an amazing therapist named Carol who focuses on mindfulness and trauma-informed therapy, like EMDR, that kind of thing, as well as like somatic, she really taught me how to actually be in my body instead of constantly being in my head and trying to avoid what's happening in my body, and really helping me integrate the two more and not be so afraid to actually feel what I'm feeling. That was a really big thing for me. So I think a lot of what I do in my creative practice, and some of which is informing what's in oevra is based on these skills that I had to learn in order to continue to live the life that I chose to live, where I really have had to learn how to live with uncertainty. And yeah, I used to deal with really intense anxiety about my big adventures. Actually, like I would be really excited to, like, I'm moving to London for this writing residency for 3 months, and subletting a temporary apartment, and all these different things I've done that seemed like a really big deal at the time because it was like a big new adventure in my life. But I was happy, but my nervous system was going so haywire. And I was like, why am I having panic attacks and can't sleep? I'm doing what I want to do. You'd think that having this freedom and being able to do this would be just a net positive, but actually it was really hard psychologically to be so destabilized. And so, yeah, I think being able to do like therapy on Zoom while I was on the go, all this time, that's been amazing. I'm grateful for these types of tools, these ways of connecting online. And not just with therapy, but with other creatives I know as well who kind of inspired me and showed me that was possible. Like I've had quite a few friends in my life who are artists who have lived and moved abroad and lived that kind of lifestyle where you're living out of a suitcase for a few months because you're going to, artist residencies or whatever, or just feel like going to work in this other city to get this different, to get this change of scenery that can be very generative. I think it was some of these women, friends that I made, and seeing that they were doing it that taught me I could do it too. But then it was like my system was not like updated enough to be able to handle that capacity of, of experience. It was like overloaded, I think. So now it's easier. I think learning the skills of regulation makes anything really possible. You just have to be able to get into this relationship with yourself where you are really tapping in to your body and making your own inner self feel safe with you, if that makes sense.
Beside your therapist and great friend, did you have any mentors or guides in your journey?
I feel there have been quite a few along the way, but it's never been like a, formal mentor relationship, more just like friends or people who I was working with who saw something in me and helped me along the way. I think one of the people who comes to mind is more recent, but when I was still living in New York City, and as I mentioned earlier, I went on to London for a few months for this writing residency thing as I was working on my second novel, which I'm still finishing. This musician in London who invited me to write at his studio space. It's like a, music studio where there's like a big open common space where sometimes they have shows or events, and musicians have their own little private studios within this, and there's like a communal kitchen. It was a really interesting experience to work in for a few months. Artists were coming and going, recording albums and stuff, and I was just like there at my desk, like, hey, and just like I made so many friends there, and we would just like sit and have tea, and that was one of the best experiences of being kind of in an artist mentorship with this musician, because he and I would just sometimes sit there and chat until late at night about what we were working on and what we're going through personally, and how just, I don't know, I think like that experience really opened me up out of my shell more than a lot of things in my life. I think that was a huge turning point. And it was really this spirit of this community that was so like encouragement centric. Like it was very much about encouraging each other and showing up for each other. And it was just so beautiful to see that there could still exist a space like this for, like low income, up and coming artists. It was something that space like that in a city like London is increasingly very rare, and there was always pressure that it could be taken away from them at any moment. So they were kind of like enjoying as much as they could, having this space. And yeah, I think just every time I've had more of a community experience like that. There was a similar one in Montreal called La Plante. I wonder if it still exists. Actually, I haven't kept in touch with them for a while. I was in kind of a punk / ambient and drone musician era at the time, and I was like playing experimental guitar. Like we were doing like, yeah, I was doing lots of music, and I made a zine, and we had a party for this zine. It was like, I was doing so many creatively fruitful things in that community in Montreal too for a couple of years. So I think that's been way more important to me than like one mentor. It usually begins with one person who's like a mentor who invites me into their community, and then it's the community that holds space for everyone. And I think, especially as a writer who's worked alone a lot, maybe that's partly why those experiences continue to be the most significant in my mind for me, is the moments where I wasn't working alone and where I was actually more immersed in that kind of way. And I've really craved it, even though I also do like having my own space, and I do like having the autonomy to go where I want. I still always want some kind of community.
So music is really important for you, and I can totally relate because there's not one day where I don't listen to music for inspiration or to put me in a good mood. How do you think music affect your creativity?
It definitely changes my state of mind and my mood and everything as soon as I turn it on. And I got really interested in the science behind why that works. And that was part of what led me down this path of making Oevra, is just getting really curious about why did these things I do intuitively make me so much more creatively, in the flow and feeling good about it and everything. It can be pretty much any music that improves my mood can do it, but mostly it's ambient music or jazz or something instrumental that really puts me into this state where I can actually just feel relaxed and get into the flow, and everything else in the world can be kind of tuned out. I realized some years ago that I have synesthesia, so I think that's part of it. I have a very visual cognitive response to sound and music, not colors like a lot of people, but it's more like shapes of sound that I see. I was trying to explain this to a friend the other day. They were like, "What does it look like?" And I was like, I've never I've never tried to explain this before, but it's like if I'm listening to music, I can like each instrument or each part that stands out, it's like making a shape, but it's like transparent, like glass almost. But the shape it makes is really it's the sound of the sound waves, the vibrations. So say if it's a drum, it's going to be a circle. Or there's this really funny, there's this creator on Instagram who makes visualizations on his computer of birdsong. And it's like you see these lines going like, and I was like, wait, that's exactly what it looks like in my head when I walk underneath like a bird singing. I felt so seen when I saw those because it's like the movement of the way sound moves in the air and bounces around the room. It's like the shapes move or appear in the place where the sound is going. Or if the audio is mixed a certain way, so it's, like you hear certain instruments on the left and certain on the right. Like I see it kind of spatially the way that like where you hear it, if that makes sense. I think there are quite a lot of people out there who have synesthesia who are working in music. I would guess I would love to meet more of them and hear what it looks like for them. Because the most common thing you hear is that you associate like a color with a number or a sound or something like that. No, but for me, it's really like the visualization of sound in my mind's eye. But sometimes that can just be really distracting. Like if I am in a restaurant or a cafe and I'm trying to listen to my friend talking and there's lots of people talking around us and there's music, sometimes there's just so much noise in my head that I actually can't quite make out what my friend like right in front of me is saying, because it's like the visuals and the sound and everything is just a bit too much. So that's part of why music, especially ambient music, is so important to me, because it really steadies things. It really, going back to like regulation, ambient music is very regulating. I think the kind of slowness and predictability and the fact that it's not really intrusive, it's something that can be kind of in the background, but it's filling the space in a nice way that kind of grounds you. It's really, really helpful in that way for creativity for me. And even people who don't have these sensory kind of things like I have say the same thing, where they're like, because I share a lot of music with people. That's like my love language. I share music on Instagram or just to friends, or friends are always asking me for like recommendations or playlists because everyone knows I'm like a freak about music. So they're like, I didn't listen to ambient music before you like turned me on to it. And now I always listen to it when I'm trying to like do this or that. And it really was a great discovery. So I've just learned through sharing my own passion that it helps people in general. You don't have to be, neurospicy to enjoy it. It's really helpful creatively too, because I can actually focus and my mind can wander in this special way that to silence for some reason is just not hitting the same.
And that's beautiful because oevra, it's kind of this mix of all your passion that you're sharing with creatives. If you would have one advice to give to artists, creative people that feel a bit lost or stuck at the moment, beside going on oevra soon, what would be your advice?
That's a really good question. I think my advice would be to spend more time every day doing nothing, literally nothing.
I love that.
Mental rest. Mental rest is one of the most important things for creativity and to be able to focus and get into the flow state. Mental rest is one of, if not the most important thing you can do, whether that's just sitting or lying down with your eyes closed for 20 minutes or actually taking a nap or just staring at the ceiling with ambient music on, just anything but looking at your phone. Just no screens, take some time every day to do nothing. And that's when the really, really good stuff actually can happen. One of the theories that I learned about that we teach, we have a kind of course in the app about creativity and how it works as far as like neuroscience and psychology is concerned. One of the theories is called incubation. And that's when your brain is really solving problems and working on things in the background all the time, but especially when you are sleeping or just doing nothing. That's why a lot of people say they get their best ideas in the shower or while you're driving a car. If you drive, for example, anything where you're kind of like in the zone and you are either resting or you're kind of in that state of like relaxed awareness and a mix between like focus and being kind of relaxed because something is just like a bit monotonous or routine. These are the times actually when the really good creative jolts can happen. And there's a lot of like really beautiful ways that musicians, especially who I've met, articulate that they are really just like an antenna or a receiver to receive music from somewhere else. And it's always like it's often at these inopportune moments, or you're just like walking through the park and suddenly you have the song and you just have to like find a way to write it down before it goes away. And I know that there's so many great mystical ways of explaining that experience, but it is also scientifically explained, and that's really cool too. I think we can have both. We can experience it as kind of a mystical thing, and we can also understand I can make that happen by going on a walk and not looking at my phone for an hour. So it doesn't have to be some kind of random chance thing to get inspiration or to get a great idea or to solve a problem you've been trying to solve on a piece of work that you're working on, or to find a new pathway forward if you've been stuck. You actually can do things on purpose that will put you in that position. It's kind of like making your own luck in a way. And I think that's where my somewhat anti-capitalist, anti-productivity streak comes in, because it's like a lot of people, not all people, a lot of people have like a guilt about taking a break or taking rest. And I think that's one of the biggest creativity killers is that kind of sense that you have to constantly be productive, or that's really shooting yourself in the foot, I think. So I think just changing the mindset to one that prioritizes rest and joy. That's the other biggest thing. It's prioritizing joy and delight, which I feel like I've always, especially like as a writer, like a creative writer, I've often been like kind of a dark girl, kind of like black cat energy girl over here. But I'm also like begrudgingly like, yeah, you really do have to allow yourself joy and silliness and playfulness. Like that's the other most important ingredient is play. And that's another very well scientifically supported hypothesis. It's not It's not woo woo to say that. It's facts. Those are the two things I would say. Take a break and be silly.
Do you ever lose track on your creative projects? Maybe you're a professional artist or creative, but what used to be your passion now feels uninspiring. Or maybe you decided to pursue a safer career path, but you just know you have that artistic side of you that's dying to come out. At Feel Seen Space, our mission is to get you back in touch with your creativity, your flow, and your purpose. If you're ready to feel seen, we offer one-on-one holistic mentoring sessions designed to reconnect you to your inner artist. You'll find all the information at the link in the show notes. We hope to see you soon. Earlier, you were talking about how much playfulness and being in joy is so important to the creative process and to being an artist. So would you say that to be an artist is to keep on living as a kid?
In a way, there is something actually true about that in a neuroscience way because of the networks in the brain that get activated when you are in that creative state or in the flow state. It's all connected with your default mode network. So that is, without getting into the all the gory details, that is the same network that really gets activated when you take psychedelics, for example. So yeah, I would say in a way it's really important to have a positive relationship to your inner child. It helps, at least. I think I know that my creativity only improved after I started taking better care of, say, my mental health and going to therapy and all that stuff, versus when I was younger and I was just like, doing more like cathartic creativity. That was definitely something that took me a while to get over, was creativity just as expression of all of my inner darkness. Like having more of that free, playful spirit and allowing that to come forward is, I think, where the best stuff that I'm the most proud of really happened. And the stuff that other people, most importantly, can really connect with, the things that really resonate with other people. And yeah.
But that's interesting because I feel like what you're doing and what we're starting to witness in the creative world is that we're finally moving away from the tortured artist archetype where you have to suffer and you have to, be
Exactly.
suicidal to be a great artist.
Exactly.
And I agree, it's not true.
It's not true. It's just really another example of like toxic culture that perpetuates this like self-fulfilling prophecy in a way where, mental health in the arts is a real concern. I think it's really important to talk about that, especially with all the different changes that have been happening in recent years and decades and will continue to change as far as technology and the way that exploits artists' work, from Spotify to AI and everything else. I think it's something that is important to rebel against joyfully.
But then, okay, so you have the kids who are in this mood all the time, you have the professional artists, but then I feel like most adults are completely separated from their creative sides. Most of them will say, well, I'm not a creative person, like I have a normal job, this is for the other, this is for the person who's privileged enough or who does this as a job or who's tortured or whatever, and they completely separate themselves from that. So why do you think that is, that we're educated into putting that side of our intelligence on the side?
That's a really good way of putting it, is that we are, a lot of people are separating part of their intelligence from that, because it is truly like creativity is such a huge fundamental part of our intelligence. And it's really interesting, like all the different people I've spoken to on the, say, business and finance side of building Oevra as a company. When I talk to them about this concept, some of them reflect back to me, say maybe it's someone who is like in more of like finance and operations side of business, and they're like, oh, I'm really interested in this idea. They never thought before about creativity as something that we actually engage in every day, just through creative thinking as problem solving or imagining a scenario and then being able to prepare for that scenario you imagined. Like, we use creative thinking every day, whether you are aware of it or not. And your imagination is there for your survival, you know? I think it's also more it's really interesting too that like around the time that I was starting to work on this, that this book on neuroaesthetics, like Your Brain on Art, came out and became a bestseller around the time I was like starting to really get into this. So this conversation is really growing, and I'm so happy about that because like it's not only is creativity a form of intelligence, and it's a cognitive skill that we need and we all use every day, and you can improve it just like memory or math. It is the same kind of cognitive skill, and but it's also increasingly important for the change of, you know, with AI and everything, like totally changing how we're going to be living and working. Like, you really do need creative thinking to adapt to all of this change. It's very important for mental health to be able to engage in creative thinking in any way, even if it's a coloring book, you know, or just journaling, or yeah, there are so many ways that even if you don't consider yourself creative at all, that you can engage the creative side of your brain. That will be super beneficial for your mental health, and also it's for your brain health. Like, it's very well proven in science that practicing creativity can help prevent neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's. It can help reduce brain aging. It really can help with other things like, you know, a better memory and that kind of thing as well. It's super interesting, like all the papers that are out there that you can find. And then it's the same thing for just engaging with the arts or any aesthetic pleasure. Like in the book Your Brain on Art, they go into this in depth. I think it was like Dr. Tara Swart, who I heard her on a podcast talking about how even just like smelling some lemon zest is neuroaesthetics, like in action. And like it does this amazing thing for your brain that can just like change your whole day. Just, you know, having flowers in your apartment or putting some art on the walls that you really like to just kind of look at and just ponder or something, or having like art books or something on your coffee table. There are so many ways that you can engage with your creative mind that don't require you to have any art skills, you know? And these are all things that just are so much better at making you happier and healthier than scrolling on Instagram. Like, one of the things I teach in the Oevra app is to have creativity snacks around your space. I got this concept of exercise snacks that I forget who it was, but there's, you know, there's the book about building habits. Like, there's all sorts of, you know, narrative discourse about habit stacking and how to get more exercise and your more movement in your day. You can really apply that same thing to creativity by having like, you know, just a pen and a notebook just like open at all times so you can just grab it and doodle. I think about how when I was a kid, you know, when we had landlines, my mom would be on the phone and she would have the phone kind of like this, you know, and she would be doodling while she's talking on the phone. And I would go over and look at like, what are you drawing while you're on the phone? And it was like flowers or just random shapes or just like, yeah, she was just doing things like that, like simultaneously while doing other things. So you can really do that while you are having your coffee. Just, it doesn't, it's better if you don't try to make it good. It's better if you just let go and do any kind of thing like writing or drawing or painting or playing an instrument or coloring or whatever.
Yeah, no strings attached. Because when
Exactly.
I started to, because I come from like a fashion background and a very like applied art mentality. But when I used to think that artists were like living this incredible, you know, inspiring life, and then I met them and I realized that they were also very obviously concerned with the business side of things and selling and producing and, oh my God, I have this big show and I need to produce, produce, produce. And it didn't seem like they were in that rest and play mode that you were talking about before. And so I think it's so important for everyone to get back in that flow. And so to dive a bit more into your app and exactly how it works, how do you manage to get people who are maybe overwhelmed or stuck artists to reconnect gradually to reach this state of flow and inspiration?
Well, I think The one thing, as someone who's definitely been there, like as a working creative and working artist who's had to pay the bills and still does, I get it exactly what you're saying. And I often have felt like these two things were at odds, like trying to make a living from your creative work, and kind of almost being like a self-defeating pursuit at times because of the stress and pressure that it, can. And I think that was a really big source of tension for a long time that really led me to start the research that would eventually give me the idea to make this app. But the way that I do it actually in the app is I made this proprietary creative process flow that you go through. If you are in that kind of state where you're just stressed and you maybe don't exactly know how to get out of it, so you can just get out of your own way and just do the creative work, without being so concerned about the bills or the production or whatever. You have just, okay, I'm going to do this simple 5-step process and it's going to shift me. It's going to transform my mindset from, step 1 to the end. I'm going to transform, where my mind is at. And I think just having that available at all times is really, it's so much simpler too than you would think. And obviously Oevra is a business too, but I like the idea that the ultimate ends of teaching is that someone can then go and use this on their own, right? So someone could use this app for a while and then say, okay, cool, now I can just go and do it on my own without the app. Like, that's cool too. I would prefer they use the app, but you can also just do this. It's free to do these things on your own too. We just provide the education and the experience and the tools in a way that's going to be really delightful and fun to use and practically useful. But the point being, these are all things that anyone can do. So first I start with music, of course, if you want. It's optional. Some people don't want any music, that's fine. But I always start with music, and in the app, that's how it's structured. Then from there, you do a couple of mindfulness exercises that are connected to the neuroscience and psychology research to help you kind of get into that creative mind state and kind of shift gears in your head in a way. And then from there, we have a creative prompt generator, which was inspired by Brian Eno's card deck oblique strategies, as well as the moon lists. I don't know if you guys know of the moon lists, but there is a card deck I have here, very beautiful. It goes with the notebooks that she makes, which are filled with prompts. And Lee Patterson, the creator of Moon Lists, is so great. She has a Substack too. And basically it's like prompts for reflection. And you have this deck. This is like a very limited edition object that I'm really happy I bought. But say this one says, "When did you delight in the bizarre?"
Love
I
that.
love that. Or cosmic wink. "When was the universe laughing at you or with you?" So good. So I was really inspired by Brian Eno's card deck and this one, Lee Patterson's work with moon lists. And I went and also Bernadette Meyer, the poet, who had these writing experiments and many other prompts for writers that you can find for free online. I kind of curated from all these different things and then wrote my own, just a ton of different exercises and prompts. And we designed a random generator. So you click the button and then it will randomly generate one of these prompts. And then you can really use these and interpret these for any kind of creative medium. So this step we call the creative warm-up. So you can just, if you don't really like the one that you get, you just generate another one and do as many as you want. And actually doing one of these exercises, whether you are just journaling or just kind of meditating on it or drawing something or playing music or whatever in response to that prompt, that actually activates the parts of your brain that then kind of get you into that creative flow. It really just gets the engine running, basically. And then from there, we have the flow state timer, where we have different timer modes and other interactive features that can support you. Say, if you're trying to do like an hour of focused flow state work, but maybe you're getting distracted or blocked, you can have little tools without leaving your flow state that can just kind of help you in the moment. So it kind of is designed to help keep you in that focused state, even if you're kind of struggling. So it's designed to really keep you in it. And then we have the streak tracker, which is the same kind of thing that Duolingo uses to really give you that dopamine response and that feedback and that like tracking and viewing your process over time that really helps people stay committed to their practice. And I think combining these things into one product is just something that doesn't exist yet. And approaching creativity like people do with mindfulness or learning anything else, I think is something that's very needed.
Yeah, absolutely. And in that field, what was existing so far was Rick Rubin's method or Julia Cameron, and obviously they're both amazing and we love them. But there's something, as you mentioned in our previous conversation, that can sometimes feel a bit intimidating or a bit too woo-woo or a bit too elitist maybe and scary. And I feel like the beauty about your product is that it's very actionable and very, very gradual. And I feel like even with Roxanne, we have a really good friend that's a guy that has a story that he wants to tell, but he's never done anything creative and he's so blocked. And I feel like, your app could be the perfect product for him to just finally get started on his project. And, it could unblock so many shadow artists.
I hope so. I mean, I think everybody is a shadow artist. Like everybody has that in them. And then whatever your nature or nurture situation was, if for some reason you never got to really get in touch with that, it's never too late to start. And it's totally harmless and free to do it. So why not? I think the thing about the creativity guides or books like Rick Rubin and Julia Cameron that have been out there for quite a while that's really interesting is one, they're both really big bestsellers showing that people really want this. People really want to learn about creativity, and there isn't something available that really makes it accessible to people if you weren't lucky enough to be encouraged to pursue that, by your family or your schooling or whatever. And that there is actually a very wide misconception about creativity. There's a total lack of understanding about what it is, how it works, and how important it is, and how accessible it is to everybody. And that it's not just some kind of soft skill, that it's something that's important in literally everything we do. Even if you're like a Wall Street finance bro, you are thinking creatively, and somehow like you need this to survive and to do anything. So I think the thing with Julia Cameron and Rick Rubin that I am intentionally trying to do differently and offer something as an alternative is that, yes, I think a little bit of the like mystical, spiritual approach to it makes it feel like it is not accessible to everyone. And I think looking at creativity more as a real practical thing that we all do every day, that we can understand through science, and that we actually have a lot of agency with. I think that's something that people don't get that message, And maybe with the artist way, people like it because it is so ostensibly easy to say, okay, I'm going to go do something once a week, like go on an artist date, and then I'm going to do the morning pages. It's like it gives you two really accessible things that you can do to make it. And that's great, but there is so much more to it than that. And also a lot of her book is talking about the divine and that kind of thing. And for someone like me who was raised without any religion, I was always a little bit turned off by that personally. So I think, different strokes for different folks. And like with Rick Rubin, it's like there's a lot of great things that he says about the creative process and the lifestyle that I agree with for sure. But there's also a lot of things about him and his whole thing that I'm not super into, that I think it's time for other voices, to provide other alternatives and other ways in for people.
Super exciting. And so how do you navigate this paradox of building an online platform or a digital experience in which you ask people to be more offline and to, be in do not disturb mode? Like that must be really hard to navigate and to create.
It is actually, there is a bit of a paradox there. But I think that's where our very like labor of love design effort comes in. And we're starting with just a desktop like web app like that you get through your browser. We have not yet made a native mobile app that you can download on your phone. Of course, you can access the Oevra app on your phone's browser, but we do intend to make a mobile app in the future, which I have a lot of ideas for. Say, what if we include app blocking or screen time limiting features in the mobile app in the future, or something that turns on do not disturb mode while you're using it, or there are so many things you can do that the technology already exists with other apps, but we could include that so that people can actually just be only focused on their creative process at the time. But yes, trying to do that for web is more challenging. You don't have the same kind of options as you do with mobile development, but people are usually more on a laptop or computer screen when they are in a place to work or to focus on something. So it also, it does make sense to, and that was a lot of our early user research that we did. People gave us that feedback. We said, would you prefer a mobile app or would you prefer something that you can just access on your browser? And most of them said on your browser, because the phone is just too distracting. And also because when you want to do something creative, you're more likely going to be doing it on a computer or at a desk. So in that way, we've really optimized intentionally for that as much as we could. And we're trying to leverage different ways to make the most of the technology rather than having it be something you have to like fight with. Like, say, you can create recurring reminders or notifications to do your creative practice, or like there are different ways that we can say in the future have things like AI integrated in the app that can actually help you without you having to say go to ChatGPT or something else, like something that's actually just devoted to your project and your creativity. Something else we'd also like to develop in the future is a way to collect your inspiration or your research for what you're working on in the Oevra app instead of having it be fragmented in many different apps or places. It's one of the biggest things we've heard from the creatives that I've interviewed to do user research for this product is like, what are your biggest pain points? And besides just like distraction, burnout, that kind of thing, it's just like my workflow has too many different apps and platforms and stuff. And I wish that the creative practice and the inspiration and the research and all that stuff was kind of consolidated in one place. And that's what I think what we're exploring building next beyond to grow the platform is more tools that will actually mean less distraction and less jumping around. Yeah. So I think the more that since we're launching for the first time and we'll be getting a lot of feedback from users as we grow, the great thing about that is that we can continue to develop the product in response to our actual users. Say, like, what we're coming out with is we developed it based on real creatives, ourselves included, But you can only do so much in a vacuum, and that's where like community and other people like actually using it and saying like, oh, I need this, I need that, I would love it if it was more like this, or if that was an option, like that will inform how this will continue to evolve. So I really love to look at this app as actually like a collective art project in a way where we can continue to iterate on it, not just for, the bottom line, but for making something really special, which with AI now you can do so much faster, even if you aren't technical, like with vibe coding and all that stuff, and it's only getting better. I think we'll be able to really find new and innovative ways to integrate into the flow state and the creative process for people as we grow and as technology continues to develop, that will hopefully make it even more of a way to like use your computer and use the technology without being subject to all the like things that are negative about that experience.
So what is your hope That's my final question, because I know we've kept you for a long time because it's so interesting. But what is your hope with this product? What do you hope that creatives will gain from experiencing this app?
I really hope that creatives using this app will feel a lightness and a flow that maybe they didn't really understand how to access before, or realize that they have so much more agency than they think when it comes to their creativity and their ability to focus and to really do what is important to them, instead of like following what might be, what like this influencer or that advertisement might be telling you is important, or what societal pressure is telling you is important. It's like, I think having a place where the objective is to do the work that's important to you and tune out all that noise. I hope that will be something that will bring a lot of joy and like awareness and well-being to people. So I think it's really important for our like inner freedom and autonomy and agency in this world that's increasingly mediated by algorithms and AI, that we intentionally go to places like this, even if it's online, that will kind of help us remain liberated from all of that. And just to always have some kind of tool available that helps you like connect with yourself really deeply. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for letting me yap for so long.
That's it for today's episode. We thank our guests for their trust, and we thank you for being a part of our community. If you like this episode and want to support our work, consider ranking our podcast on Apple or Spotify. And if you know someone who could benefit from this conversation, please share our work with them to help them spread the dream of a conscious, creative community. Talk soon.